Zhang Yi scratched the back of his head and said embarrassedly, "Sorry, the waitress seems to have taken me the wrong way. I'll leave now." Hearing this, the man, Deng Shintong, told Zhang Yi that he wasn't in the wrong room. He personally asked the waitress to bring him here. Zhang Yi's eyes flashed. He furrowed his brows, trying to recall if he'd ever encountered this person before, but nothing came to mind. "Sorry, but I don't seem to know you." Deng Shintong placed his wine on the table in front of him and said casually, "Your name is Zhang Yi, right? A person who can be personally received by Bailey Chongqing should still have some ability. Of course, I don't particularly recognize him as the captain, but I have heard a little about your affairs." Zhang Yi's expression became serious. The other party's tone was a bit loud and obnoxious, and he actually didn't take Bailey Chongqing seriously. Moreover, he even bypassed Bailey Chongqing to get him there. What was his intention? Did he know my background? "Who are you?" Deng Shintong glanced at Zhang Yi. His peach-like eyes were filled with a playful smile. "You should have heard of my legend. My name is Deng Shintong." Zhang Yi didn't know where the man in front of him got his confidence from. When he spoke, there was an air of inexplicable self-confidence about him. And about his name, it was as if knowing it was a matter of course. "Well, it didn't matter. I just need to personally go find Bailey Chongqing." Zhang Yi could only smile awkwardly. "I've heard a lot about you." But this perfunctory tone obviously made Deng Shintong very dissatisfied. His face changed and he frowned. "You haven't heard of my name, have you?" Zhang Yi was nearing his limit. He didn't want to talk anymore with this self-absorbed person. After all, he brought him there without his permission, delayed his search for Bailey Chongqing, and was still being self-indulgent here. It was really perverted. "Sorry, I'm not from Blizzard City, so it's not surprising that I haven't heard of your name. I have to go meet my friends, so I won't accompany you." After Zhang Yi said this, he had already turned around and was about to leave. But the next moment, a hand suddenly rested on his shoulder. Zhang Yi's eyes tightened, and he instinctively reacted, but was easily blocked by the other party. "Don't be nervous. I just want to see what kind of person Bailey Chongqing's guest was," Deng Shintong said, not feeling the least bit threatened. Facing Deng Shintong, Zhang Yi was surprised to see two of them. As one held his hand, the other was still sitting on the sofa, with his arms leisurely folded. "Twins?" Zhang Yi murmured, curious and uncertain. But upon hearing what Zhang Yi just asked, Deng Shintong initially said nothing, his eyes full of amusement as he stared at Zhang Yi. When he eventually spoke up, the room echoed with the sound of the two speaking simultaneously, saying the exact same words like they were one person. The voice echoed in the air, and suddenly it seemed as if countless people were speaking at the same time. Originally, there were only 2 figures in the room, but suddenly they turned into 10, then 20. They all looked the same, and the voices were erratic and no one knew where they came from. Zhang Yi had no idea what the other party's ability was, and he felt unease and became more cautious the more things developed. "I heard that you are a space-based mutant. Can you let me see your ability? I really need such a member in my team. If your ability is good, I can consider letting you be a substitute for the god team." Zhang Yi said nothing. He was a little pissed off at this point. The fucker in front of him had maintained a high profile from beginning till now. He also spoke arrogantly, and ignored Zhang Yi's thoughts and presence at all. Although he didn't know what the other party's ability was, he was never a person who could be manipulated at will. There was a glimmer in his eyes, and he intended to make Deng Shintong regret his actions. He had already prepared to distance himself and then defend and counterattack. If necessary, it was not impossible to use his divine power at this distance. But just when the situation grew too tense, the elevator door suddenly opened, and Bailey Chongqing's sturdy body hurried out. "Zhang Yi, why are you here?" Bailey Chongqing walked over with a nervous smile and put his arm around Zhang Yi's shoulders. "Come back with me quickly. I was waiting for you to have a drink." Deng Shintong saw Bailey Chongqing and still maintained his playful smile. His eyes were a little disappointed. He said lightly, "Bailey Chongqing, I found your friend very interesting and wanted to chat with him for a while. You don't mind, do you?" With his arm still leisurely resting on Zhang Yi's shoulders, Bailey Chongqing, still with a nervous smile, laughed awkwardly and said it was an honor for Captain Deng to actually be interested in his friend. But suddenly, Bailey Chongqing's eyes narrowed slightly, his nervous demeanor completely gone as he stared at Deng Shintong with a playful smile. "At least you should tell me in advance about this kind of thing, right? After all, we are all captains of the investigation team. Isn't it a bit against the rules for you to do this, Captain?" Deng Shintong's mouth curled up slightly, with obvious contempt. He raised a finger to make a point. "If it was Bian Junwu who said this, I might have given him some face. But your strength doesn't seem to be up to par. It's obvious you're not qualified." Bailey Chongqing was immediately furious after being mocked by Deng Shintong, and an astonishing aura was released from him. Deng Shintong, are you going to make a big fuss in Blizzard City? Deng Shintong frowned. He seemed very unhappy with Bailey Chongqing's attitude towards him. How dare he question me? Deng Shintong thought silently. His playful demeanor was momentarily gone. What's more, with Bailey Chongqing here, he couldn't continue to question Zhang Yi. After all, if he made a big fuss here, he would be blamed by his superiors. Deng Shintong just thought Zhang Yi was an interesting person with some potential, and he could become a reserve member of his Tianxin team to help store things. Although he was not afraid of making a big fuss for Zhang Yi, he didn't want to add trouble to himself. So with some reluctance, Deng Shintong waved his hand. Forget it. You may not know what kind of opportunity you missed. Our Tianxin team is the strongest in the Jiangnan region. After saying that, he relaxed lazily on the sofa, closing his eyes. Then, the countless figures also did the same as they all disappeared in an instant without any trace. Zhang Yi listened to Deng Shintong's words, and the only thing that piqued his interest was the mentioning of the strongest investigation team in the Jiangnan region. Bian Junwu once said that there were 6 investigation teams in Blizzard City, and Deng Shintong was obviously the captain of another investigation team. Zhang Yi already had some understanding of Deng Shintong's ability. With the departure of Deng Shintong, Bailey Chongqing breathed a sigh of relief. He smiled and apologized to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, I'm sorry that you encountered this kind of thing just after you arrived. Zhang Yi smiled lightly, glanced casually in the room, and replied that it was okay. It wasn't a big deal, and it actually also allowed him to meet another captain-level figure. He turned around and said they should leave. Bailey Chongqing took Zhang Yi to the elevator. Inside, they descended to a lower floor. Bailey Chongqing decided to tell Zhang Yi the identity of Deng Shintong. The man just now was Deng Shintong, the captain of the God Squad, and one of the 6 major investigation teams. He is very capable, but his temperament is extremely arrogant. He was born in the Deng family, a big and influential family in Jinling. Relying on his strong talent and family background, he always looks arrogant. But he's not a bad person, just a super rich second generation with talent and background. Zhang Yi replied lightly that it didn't matter. He could feel that Deng Shintong had no ill will towards him, but the feeling of looking down upon by someone from a high position really made him very unhappy. By the way, tell me about your 6 investigation teams. I'm quite interested. In case I encounter them in the future, I'll be mentally prepared and not offend them. Zhang Yi spoke in a calm tone. And to this, Bailey Chongqing was very generous, saying that it doesn't matter because, in Blizzard City, everyone knew their names. Anyway, the 6 investigation teams were personally established by Commander Zhu Zheng. They were God, Demon, Iron Blood, Black Robe, Rose, and Samsara. Each team had its own style and was very easy to identify. Our Black Robe team is all in black combat uniforms. The God team is in silver combat uniforms, which is the highest technological masterpiece of the Deng family. The other 4 investigation teams are all on missions outside and are not in Blizzard City for the time being. The characteristics of the Rose team are the most obvious, because all their members are women. Zhang Yi nodded slightly and committed everything to memory. Obviously, it can be seen that the affairs of the Jiangnan region are indeed very busy. Otherwise, there would not be a regional conference held here, and there would not be 4 investigation teams currently on missions outside. In other words, people think that 2 investigation teams are enough to guard here. Deng Shintong. Zhang Yi thought of the arrogant guy just now and couldn't help but recite his name silently. How does this man's strength compare to Bian Junwu? Zhang Yi stared at Bailey Chongqing with a serious expression, already having a basic judgment of Deng Shintong's ability. However, Zhang Yi did not know the level of Deng Shintong's strength. Bailey Chongqing's face became serious when he heard Deng Shintong's name. I said that he was very talented. This was not an exaggeration and is all related to the Deng group behind him. The Deng group has a very terrifying foundation, and its industries involve many high-tech fields. Among them is biotechnology. Deng Shintong's current strength is inseparable from the full training of their family. If we only talk about superpowers, he is stronger than Bian Junwu. After all, he does not have huge superpower side effects like Captain Bian. Zhang Yi's heart trembled. He knew very well how powerful the destructive power of Bian Junwu's ability was. If this Deng Shintong's ability was even better than Bian Junwu, then it also meant that his strength was not inferior to his own. Armed with this information, Zhang Yi thought of Deng Shintong definitely being a dangerous person, so he'd better not to provoke him. His thoughts were cut off as Bailey Chongqing continued. Of course, strength cannot be generalized by the strength of superpowers. In terms of combat experience, Captain Bien has no problem leaving him 10 blocks behind. Zhang Yi nodded slightly. Indeed, having strong abilities was one thing, but whether you can fully utilize your strengths and abilities in battle was also another very important thing. But at present, we have to reiterate the theory of shuriken and pebbles. Zhang Yi looked at Bailey Chongqing with interest. Then, do you know what his ability is? Bailey Chongqing glanced at Zhang Yi suspiciously. Why are you asking this? Even if you know, I advise you not to fight him. Zhang Yi spread his hands and said with a smile, I'm just a little curious. He played me around just now, and I'm a little worried that he will do something to me in the future. Bailey Chongqing smiled with his arms folded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. You don't have to worry about this. As the captain of the God Squad, although he is conceited, he will not attack you as long as you don't violate the rules of the region. As for his ability, I really don't know, because there are only a few people in the Jiangnan region who can make him take action. When Bailey Chongqing said this, the smile on his face was clearly bitter. I don't know how long I can continue to do this as the captain of the Black Robe team. Although he was now the captain of the Black Robe Squad, it didn't mean that his strength was enough to compete with the other 5. The gap between him and Bian Junwu, or Deng Shintong, was too big. A barely detectable smile passed through the corners of Zhang Yi's mouth. Bailey Chongqing didn't know Deng Shintong's ability, but he was aware of it. The ability of multiple figures was not a clone, but some sort of illusion. From the beginning, the image of him sitting on a sofa in front of Zhang Yi was false. Zhang Yi was a space-related mutant, and he was most sensitive to the fluctuations of space. So he knew that Deng Shintong had been hiding in the room, and then suddenly appeared behind him, pretending to have thousands of incarnations. The reason why Zhang Yi let him touch his shoulder was just to hide his ability. But to be honest, this ability was indeed very powerful. If used well, it can kill people silently. But if it was against Zhang Yi, the outcome was hard to say. At least his invisibility was not very effective for Zhang Yi. Of course, with him as a captain, and with his strength at the level of Bian Junwu, Deng Shintong must definitely have other abilities. If it was not necessary, Zhang Yi was unwilling to mess with him. It would be best if they can become friends. But when he thought of his arrogant temper, Zhang Yi couldn't help but sigh. Forget it, he had no interest in currying favor with the powerful. The elevator came to an expected stop on the 7th floor, and Bailey Chongqing brought Zhang Yi to a bar. At first glance, you can see the fun and lively scene where you can indulge your inner desires. There were several fierce men, holding bottles of wine in one hand and hugging a charming woman in the other, doing whatever they want under the dim lights. The neon lights were shining on the central stage, and the scene was erotic and the desire was sinking. It's really lively, Zhang Yi commented with a smile. How about it? Do you like it here? There is no such place in Tianhai City, right? Zhang Yi glanced at him with a mischievous smile and questioned lightly. If I want to do this in Tianhai City now, can't I do it in minutes? Bailey Chongqing thought about it helplessly. Well, I almost forgot that you are already the local emperor of Tianhai City. Bailey Chongqing then offered Zhang Yi the VIP menu and asked, what kind of wine do you like to drink? Zhang Yi politely waved his hand. Forget about wine. Drinking will delay things and inevitably lead to trouble. After all, you can rest in Blizzard City. But I came here as a guest to do something. Bailey Chongqing nodded and sat down. Okay then, what do you want to know from me? But let me make it clear first. There are some things I can tell you, but there are other things I can't tell you. Zhang Yi sat lazily on the sofa, crossing his legs with a faint smile on his lips. Don't worry, what I'm asking is not a secret. He looked at Bailey Chongqing and said with a meaningful smile, you know, I'm not interested in coming to Blizzard City. I just want to confirm what this meeting requires of us. Bailey Chongqing's expression slightly became solemn. This matter is actually related to the death of Captain Bien. This is the first time that a captain-level figure has died. It has caused concerns among the top leaders of the headquarters. If they continue to send troops out to perform missions in the future, there may be casualties among the top mutants. That is why it is necessary to integrate local forces. One is to preserve the existing mutant strength in Blizzard City, and the other is to facilitate management of the entire Jiangnan region and avoid internal friction. Zhang Yi had thought about what Bailey Chongqing said, but this was not what he was most concerned about. I want to know whether you guys will conduct a compulsory conscription. Zhang Yi's strength was first class in the entire Jiangnan region, so it couldn't be hidden forever. If the headquarters forces him to Blizzard City and become a member of the investigation team one day, he would certainly be despondent. Bailey Chongqing was silent. He thought for a while and replied that he didn't know about that. But what he can tell Zhang Yi was that absorbing powerful forces from the surrounding areas was what they have always been doing. Blizzard City has a permanent population of more than 1 million. Most of them are not locals. We have strict screening criteria for every resident. If the contribution is not enough, they will be expelled. And if we find very capable people in the outside world, they will be absorbed by us. That's why even a strong mutant like Captain Bien has to work hard to complete missions, because he has a family, and if he wants to maintain a high standard of living for his family, he must continue to complete tasks to obtain points. When it comes to points, Bailey Chongqing explained to Zhang Yi that money was useless in Blizzard City. Even jewelry, gold and silver are just scrap metal. Only points are the universal currency. Zhang Yi took a sip of his hot water, looked at Bailey Chongqing and asked leisurely, "So that means that the Jiangnan region will most likely select some members to join the headquarters investigation team this time, right?" "That's hard to say," Bailey Chongqing replied seriously. "At least for an outstanding mutant like you, I'm afraid the top management will do everything they can to keep you." Facing Bailey Chongqing's ridicule, Zhang Yi smiled slightly and said, "If I came to Blizzard City, it would be difficult to explain the mission report on killing Yuan Kongya." Zhang Yi was marginalized when it came to his strength, so Bailey Chongqing couldn't explain it to Zhu Zheng. Sure enough, Bailey Chongqing's face was slightly uncomfortable.